Recently I read this book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, and I did not like it. I found it bloated, shallow, and felt it offered very little for understanding the dynamics of increasingly powerful surveillance apparatuses which impacts every aspect of our lives and is ushering in a period of intense authoritarian control. In contrast, I also recently read this, a collection of essays called Resisting Borders and Technologies of Violence, which, despite being much thinner and looking at the issue of surveillance from a slightly different angle to Zuboff's work, was a far more satisfying examination of the contemporary age of surveillance capitalism compared to the age of surveillance capitalism. So in this video you're going to get like a 2-for-1 book review of both these works on surveillance in the current moment. And I guess you're going to see me get more het up and annoyed about Shoshana Zuboff's book because it was bad. Beginning with this book, which was an international bestseller in 2019, which made me, figure that this was an essentially liberal work, but if I'd known that Obama had listed it as one of his favourites of that year, I might have given it a wider berth. But even figuring that the book would be essentially liberal, I still thought it would contain, at least some valuable empirical information about the form of surveillance capitalism. I was wrong. And we will get to why in a minute. But first, let's summarise Zuboff's core argument. For Zuboff, the increasing power of digital corporations like Google, Microsoft and Facebook is tied to their increasing ability to not only track our online behaviour through shopping, location data and likes on social media.
The modern internet is built on an implicit bargain. We get free access to websites, life-changing apps, and connective social media, and in exchange, companies collect our data to sell to advertisers.
But their ability to accumulate this data to reveal intimate territories of the self, like personality and emotion, which can be used to generate what Zuboff calls behavioural surplus. Behavioural surplus in this narrative has become the definitive source of value under surveillance capitalism, and from chasing this surplus, these corporations have developed a new species of power called instrumentarianism. Instrumentarianism, according to Zuboff, is the instrumentation and instrumentalization of behaviour for the purpose of modification, prediction, monetization, and control. This new species of power has allowed big corporations to overtake the state as the centre of power in contemporary capitalism. While the state initially fostered the tech required for surveillance capitalism, it now looks on jealously at what corporations can achieve, which is apparently the total control of social life. For Zuboff, this new instrumentarian power makes the current mode of capitalist existence qualitatively distinct from prior capitalism. She justifies this position by arguing that, firstly, classic capitalism is all about free markets without perfect knowledge, whereas surveillance capitalism strives for perfect knowledge and the markets aren't really that free anymore. Secondly, surveillance capitalism abandons capitalism's apparent organic reciprocities, whereby a balance is struck between the demands of capital and of consumers. Consumers are more central to this than producers, which is quite telling. But this allows for the development of freedom and democracy. Surveillance capitalism no longer has to rely on people as consumers. Instead, their behavioural surplus is the source of value. Finally, these features of surveillance capitalism converge to undermine the individualism of capitalist free market democracy and instead push towards a hive collective whereby we all act at the whims of obscure data corporations led by algorithmic fine-tuners. I've not seen Pluribus yet, and if I had, I might be able to make a reference to Pluribus here, but I'll put a clip of Pluribus in and maybe it's relevant.
Who is we?
We is us. Just us.
Who the fuck is us?
Us.
I'll watch it at some point and we'll figure it out. It'll be fun for both of us. Zuboff's medicine to this dystopian image is simple. Basically Keynesian regulatory dynamics, which, is a bit of a letdown if I'm going to be honest. It's a long run to a short hop. And let's be clear, this all seems to me stupid as hell. So let's get into it. So the first thing I want to point to is just how shallow the conceptualization of surveillance capitalism's mode of production is. Zuboff's vision of surveillance capitalism is that it's no longer being driven by production or even through the notion of consumption. Instead, value is sourced within the production of behavioural surplus. Now for me, this term is incredibly annoying because what the hell does it mean? Surplus means over and above what is required. What is the behaviour that we do that is in surplus to what we should do? Surplus to what? Is it value or surplus producing behaviour? The concept is ill-defined throughout the book, but the clearest view is in the beginning of the book where Zuboff defines behavioural surplus as the data which is not used to improve services, but is instead collected and sold to make predictions on what she calls behavioural surplus markets. And this itself seems like a problematically neat distinction to make between what behaviour improves services and what's simply sold. And also why that improving services wouldn't produce value, and why it seems both clean and messy, if I'm going to be honest. But regardless, what is probably more important than my annoyance over the term is that throughout the book, Zuboff almost never mentions what these behavioural predictions are largely in service to. Marketing. Marketing is a massive industry, and your data is constantly collated and sold to advertisers to encourage you to buy more and more.
Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy we don't need.
You'll notice that anytime you look for a specific product, or maybe you post about being single or something, you'll start getting adverts which are more or less relevant to your online behaviour. This is the behavioural surplus being used. And it should be noted, and I'll come back to this in a bit, that this data is used really poorly. Like, I recently bought a backpack for travelling, and I'm still getting adverts for backpacks, even though I just bought a backpack. So if there's one thing my data should show I specifically don't need, it's a backpack. But I'm still getting adverts for backpacks. So why is my data being used like that? But what's essential here is that the massive marketing industry is only made possible by the mass production of commodities for sale on the market. The only reason this behavioural surplus has any value at all is because it's underpinned by the global production and mass consumption of commodities. When Zuboff argues that capitalism is no longer driven by production, she is completely ignoring that today more people than ever before in history are employed formally and informally within global circuits of commodity production. Her vision of a commodityless society driven by knowledge and data is one which completely invisibilizes the majority of the world's population. It takes a narrow slice of middle-class life for people in the US and Europe and centers them as the only people that matter, maybe the only people who exist. In fact, to justify her opinion that prior forms of capitalism produced freedom and democracy, she cites the revolutionary USA while making precisely zero reference to slavery or the continued genocide of indigenous people. This is all the more insulting as throughout the book, Zuboff makes reference after reference to the colonial era, drawing comparisons between conquistadors and big tech, and yet she completely ignores ongoing global imperial divisions of labour, which facilitates the commodity production that underpins surveillance capitalism through a racial organisation of labour exploitation. This reality is completely absent. You'd be forgiven for thinking people can eat data to survive, and I think this just feeds into another major problem with this book, a problem which makes it of very little use as an empirical resource. Throughout the book, Zuboff appears to just repeat the propaganda claims of tech companies and researchers as if they're the truth. And one particularly silly example is her apocalyptic description of Facebook and IBM's ability to apparently read our very souls. Apparently IBM, according to IBM, can trace 5 dimensions of an individual's personality to apparently limitless applications. Setting aside that we're not really tracing personality here, because what even is a personality? That's not defined in the text. What we are looking at here is IBM marketing copy. My note on page 276, which talks about this, just says, right, but this is bollocks. And not to toot past JTD's horn for his astute comment while he was reading this at the gym sauna, but he's right, this is just horoscopes. It's just Myers-Briggs for marketing directors. It's just Myers-Briggs. And down the page, Zuboff writes that IBM research demonstrates that agents who express personality traits associated with agreeableness and conscientiousness produce significantly higher levels of customer satisfaction. And my note on this reads, lots of companies say shit. And this isn't to say that we should just dismiss all evidence from corporations, but it does mean that we have to treat it very, very skeptically, because it's often made public, this research is often made public just as marketing. It's just for marketing. Like, what does it mean for a person to have an agreeableness personality trait? Is that a fluid, context-dependent element of their life which appears more or less frequently and is produced due to a complex interplay between a variety of aspects of an infinitely complex human being? How can that be rendered neatly into a predictor of customer satisfaction? Maybe this is just marketing. And there are many examples of this throughout the book which do make it difficult to justify even referencing it as an empirical resource. I can't trust which elements of this are straight ad copy, but maybe the most egregious example of accepting and actually reinforcing the premise of the thing the author is supposed to be critiquing is her treatment of behavioralism. Behavioralism is an extremely controversial, probably largely considered outdated theory in psychology, popularized by B.F. Skinner, who Zuboff frequently cites. It's essentially an extreme form of scientism as applied to human behavior. Every human behavior can be reduced to a series of complex but objectively determinable causes. In this sense, there's no free will, only the outcome of a series of stimuli and prompts. And you can see how there's a connection between this view and how the tech world understands the production of behaviour, including that fucking personality shite. And you know, an interesting book might set out to trace the effects of this radical scientism on tech cultures in Silicon Valley. You could examine the institutional impact of these theories on the development and design of tech, all while critiquing the foundational assumptions of the theories and thereby understanding the clear limits of big data and actually effectively controlling populations, pulling away the dystopian facade and revealing the real concerns for privacy, safety, and surveillance that lurk behind the scary curtain.
Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
Unfortunately, this is not an interesting book. Instead of offering any institutional critique of behavioralism, Zuboff reifies it. She upholds its central insights as true, and from that truth derives the terrifying tech dystopia at play, shielding the actual real things we should be scared of. For Zuboff, surveillance capitalism provides the framework to realise Skinner's vision of a behaviour modification utopia where all behaviours can be traced and effectively altered to suit an overriding plan. The tech can be used to prompt stimuli responses. Skinner's vision is brought to life in the relentless pursuit of surveillance capitalism's economic imperatives and the ubiquitous digital apparatus that surveillance capitalism creates and harnesses to its novel aims. Instrumentarian power bends the new digital apparatus to the interests of the surveillance capitalist project, finally fulfilling Skinner's call for the instruments and methods of a behavioural technology comparable in power and precision to physical and biological technology. The result is a pervasive means of behavioural modification whose economies of action are designed to maximise surveillance revenues. Let's be clear. This is not a critique of radical behavioralism. This is an acceptance of its core premises. The only way that Zuboff's dystopian description of a society of control makes any sense in this context is if she assumes that Skinner is fundamentally correct and that human behaviour can be reduced to a series of reactions to stimuli which only needs the right apparatus to be fully realised. She accepts that tracking cookies, marketing, ads, Facebook likes, addictive TikTok algorithms are all able to effectively and consistently shape human behaviour far beyond anything else that we have seen in history. This is not a critique of radical behavioralism. This is radical behavioralism. And finally, before I move on to briefly reference a much better book, what is utterly sidelined in this discussion is the role of the state. Zuboff's view of the state's interaction with surveillance capitalism is that while much of the technology emanates from the state, it has now been left behind by the more powerful market actors. And this view is based on what is frankly an embarrassing perspective on neoliberalism. For Zuboff, neoliberalism is just the reduction in the size and power of the state and the unleashing of market forces. A tired and inadequate definition that ignores decades of scholarship on the topic and would be maybe justifiable to publish 20 years ago. But by sidelining the role of the state, she obscures how some of the most egregious and terrifying expansions of surveillance technology are not through the accumulation of data for marketing, but through border technologies, policing, and workplace surveillance. The state, while absent for Zuboff, is at the forefront of utilising surveillance to facilitate the growing authoritarian tendencies of neoliberal capitalism. It's through the interdependence of the neoliberal state and tech companies like Palantir, mentioned only once in Zuboff's book, by the way. Zuboff's book on surveillance mentions Palantir once. But it's through the connections between the state and tech that the full force of surveillance has been used to carry out ICE raids, to arrest Palestinian solidarity demonstrators or fire workers.
The agency is in the process of buying a tool that will let agents see hundreds of millions of people's phone location data. This is a big reversal from a previous decision that the agency made to allegedly not use location data harvested remotely from people's phones.
These elements of true surveillance capitalism are far more satisfyingly explored in the various essays in this book, in Resisting Borders and Technologies of Violence. The short essays, they're only about 6 pages normally. They all explore these dynamics of increasing surveillance. They frequently connect the force of surveillance in bordering to the organisation of global systems of production and reproduction, thereby rooting this surveillance regime in the material foundations of the economy rather than an ephemeral hint of fucking gossamer of behavioural data. For example, in one essay, Petra Molnar traces the expansion of EU border security through the European Border Security Organisation, Frontex, and its intensified racialising surveillance technologies since the EU's 2021 New Migration Pact.
When people try to enter the European Union to ask for asylum, they're often detected or catched by technologies like cameras on fences at the border, surveillance cameras, but also infrared cameras, and that enables border guards to catch people, not arrest them, but to capture them and then beat them up, attack them with dogs, electrocute them in a way with tasers, and then send them back over the border and deport them.
This was a migration pact which utilised state and corporate partnership to expand racialised policing of borders in especially frontier states like Greece, which European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called Europe's shield in a, revealingly colonial turn of phrase.
I thank Greece for being our European Aspida in these times.
Translate Aspida as shield.
In Petra's short essay, which is again about 6 pages long, she's able to highlight the connections between colonialism, racism, global divisions of labour and surveillance with greater clarity than the entirety of Zuboff's 500-page book. And in another really useful essay, Nisha Kapoor shows how the COVID-19 pandemic intensified state-corporate entanglement, especially through surveillance technology. Kapoor points to Palantir's acquisition of NHS data during the pandemic, which was sold for $1, and which has been used to extend border surveillance throughout the UK's health service.
Palantir secured its first ever deal to handle NHS data in March last year for a nominal fee of £1. The contract was extended considerably in December 2020 to cover a far greater range of subjects, including Brexit and flu vaccinations, and is now worth £23.5 million. The NHS says that was all done by the book, because Palantir is an accredited supplier to the UK public sector. But doctors warn there's not been enough transparency about a company with such strong links to US police, immigration and secret services.
And once again, this is more effective in highlighting the wearing away of privacy and the differentiated impact surveillance has on different groups. Surveillance capitalism is not a new form of capitalism, but it's more effectively and intensely organising populations for exploitation and for death under neoliberalism's increasingly fascistic hegemony. The essays in this book leave you with no illusion that surveillance is a serious and enduring problem for political organisation. It's not a dystopian nightmare whereby companies direct a pliant hive of behavioural data generators to accumulate revenue which emerges spontaneously from nowhere. It's real life, the dystopian nightmare of the real world. And for this reason, if you want a book on surveillance capitalism, don't pick up Zuboff's bloated mess. Pick this up instead. To conclude, I want to just reflect for a moment on something that I noticed while reading The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. When I was reading all of the corporate propaganda and the dystopian proclamations of a world controlled by big tech, I couldn't help but be reminded of the ways that AI companies and profligators insist on peddling the fear that AI is quickly becoming a world-level threat. AI general intelligence is coming and it's going to end up killing us all or controlling our lives, directing us as a pliant hive.
This is what the world will look like in about a decade from now. A tech utopia where humans barely have to work. That's according to a group of AI researchers who've written a controversial and influential paper called AI 2027. But they also predict that within 5 years of this, humanity will be wiped out.
And this is obviously bollocks, but what it is essentially hype for the AI industry. It helps them if we are told AI is incredibly powerful, that it can do all these amazing and terrifying things, when in reality, the LLM model can't even be considered close to any kind of general intelligence. It's a word generator. But it's not just marketing, it's a distraction. If you're worried about the end of days, you might not look at the elimination of jobs or the use of AI in policing and border control. You might ignore the real fight for apocalyptic shadowboxing. And I think this is exactly what Zuboff's book does. In painting this apocalyptic picture of the instrumentarian society, she hides the state. She hides the ways in which data can be used by police and by border regimes. She even hides the ways that accumulation of data has been accessed by violent men to stalk and murder their ex-partners. There are real dangers to the collection of massive amounts of your data. And we should be concerned with privacy, but we need to confront the horror of the real world, not wallow in a dystopian fantasy. So if you want to read about how technology is being used to surveil and control us in service of capitalism, read this book. Don't bother with the 500 pages of liberal dross. I'm done. It's Christmas. It's time to stop.
Alright, thank you for watching. As you can probably tell if you're familiar with dates, this isn't actually Christmas. This is January 2026 that I uploaded this. I recorded this before Christmas. That's what that's about. But thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you really liked it, if you felt like it scratched an itch, then please give it a share, give it a like, give it a comment. And if you feel like it deserves even more, then you can sign up to my Patreon at tiers starting at $2 a month, going up to, I think, $15 is the highest. And you get a various assortment of perks, I guess. $5 and up patrons get access to a Discord server. Everyone $2 and up gets early access to videos and scripts and extra writing. And $10 and up get their names read out in the credits, which I will do in just 1 second. If you feel like you cannot commit to a regular amount, you can always give a one-off donation via Ko-fi and PayPal. You can also sign up to YouTube memberships, which has similar perks as everything else, early access and all that stuff. If you, like I say, if you like it, then please give it a share. Things are shit out on YouTube at the moment, and I will be promoting this as much as I can, but as ever, it's a fucking nightmare. With that said, let's read the names of $10 and up patrons. We have Demo Squid, Dying of Thirst, Soval Hayes, Anita Anispe, Bonbon, Cameron Blakemore, Daniel Swing, Earl Grey T, Ellis Wren, FD Signifier, Hey Joe, Joshua Moldenhauer, Katie Marshall, Kim Crawley, Nina G Public Relations, S, Tom Hutton, Unoriginal Name, Ghost, Aaron, Alex, Cadesware, Christopher Poth, Daniel Hughes, Duncan Skinner, Esoteric Fictionalism, Eugene K, J Fraser Cartwright, Jack, Jacob Quinn Schenker, Joel, Casper Grunda Westberg Larson, Kieran Gore, Layum, Mason Colbert, Melanie Estes, Morgussi, Nella Zucheva, Niels Abelgard, Paul Singleton, Via Westphal, Rachel Ann, Rachel Mixon, Robin, Tamash Kispeter, TB Skyan, Tim, Tinfoil Pancakes, Tom Price, and Xander Corbis. And yeah, if you want to add your name to that list, go right ahead. And I think that's everything. I'll have another video out soon that I recorded before Christmas as well, but was about US imperialism. And in the interim, I guess some things happened that were relevant to the discussion. So I have to record some extra stuff for that. Alright, that's it. Love you. Bye.